And in this video, we take a look at the location, White House Farm and Workhouse Lane, and why that was chosen as the site to commit a triple murder.
It was a crime which pushed everything else off the front pages. 3 men, all known criminals, found shot dead in the Essex countryside. It was a cold-blooded, professional killing. The victims had many enemies, but which one wanted them executed?
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The next question surrounding the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe is why White House Farm? Why was that location specifically chosen? Now, for me, and bearing in mind this is just my own thoughts and theories on the matter, but I believe that this location was chosen specifically for the fact that it had a gun club nearby. This gun club was part of White House Farm, and they only shot there on a Wednesday. I believe that this could also explain why the murders took place despite there being snowfall, despite it being less than perfect weather conditions to commit such an atrocity. And I don't just mean the fact that it's not sunshine and, fluffy white clouds, but the fact that it was snowing. There's always that risk of preserving evidence, preserving footprints, preserving something under the snow that you don't realise that you've dropped, which later is recovered by the police. It was a risky move to commit such a crime during those weather conditions. However, due to the fact that we had such cold and wintry conditions on December the 6th, 1995, did mean that the gun club closed early that day. Now, I've often surmised that this location, White House Farm, Workhouse Lane, it was chosen specifically. The reason for this is, as I say, they only shot there on a Wednesday up until around 6 p.m. I believe the time of death is most likely correct, just before 7 p.m. when the shooting would normally have just stopped. There's no way that anyone from the shooting range is going to wander down Workhouse Lane, as the shooting range and that lane are not actually directly connected. And by choosing that day of the week and that time period, it would blend in with your everyday normal Wednesday in Rettendon. Wednesday is the shooting day. They use shotguns, it's clay pigeon shooting, and interestingly, the cartridges used in the murders were popular with clay pigeon shooters. So everything tells me that the location itself, the day of the week, and the time that these individuals were most likely killed all fits together. So now let's take a look at how Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were lured to such a remote location. Firstly, we're going to start off by taking a look at a brief newspaper article from West Hanningfield, just a couple of miles away from the scene of the crime. The following newspaper article is from the 3rd of November 1995, with the headline, £500,000 worth of drugs were dropped from aircraft. Police believe that bungling drug dealers could have dropped more than £500,000 worth of cannabis in a farmer's pond from an aircraft by mistake. The tightly packed cannabis in black plastic packets was fished from the water in West Hanningfield by Essex police divers. 4 packets had originally been spotted by farmer Jens Haustrup near the edge of the pond. Sergeant Nigel Dermott, who led the diving operations, said, quote, "I have never seen anything like it." The haul is believed to be the biggest of its type in Essex. Police forensic scientists are drying out some of the 53 packets to try to discover its source. The haul weighed more than 300 weight. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Story, head of Chelmsford CID, praised Mr. Haustrup for quickly alerting police. He said it was possible that the cannabis had been dropped from an aircraft. The drugs could have been in the water for a couple of years. Chelmsford detectives, led by DS Peter Redman, are following various lines of inquiry as to who the cannabis might have been destined for. Now, considering this newspaper article was just a few weeks before the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and the locality itself, West Hanningfield is incredibly close to Rettendon, just a few miles away. From memory, I believe it's like a 6 or 7 minute drive off the top of my head, but certainly in very close proximity of Rettendon. So is it beyond the realms of possibility that this newspaper article has come out a few weeks before the deaths of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, and then somehow these three individuals are found on the other side of a locked gate which leads to fishing ponds, big lakes and fishing ponds? Could they have been lured down there on the pretense of finding more drugs? Now, even if this isn't the case, I still think that there's a possibility that just by viewing that newspaper article, it would give you an idea of how you could lure someone to a remote farm track location, such as drugs are being flown in, they're going to be dropped near a pond, etc., etc. Do you remember that other drop a few weeks ago, or where they found all of these packets in a farmer's pond in West Hanningfield? It's an easy way to tempt someone to a remote location. Now, the other reason that I believe that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe may have been down the bottom of Workhouse Lane on December the 6th, 1995 comes in the form of the gun club. Now, we know in the weeks leading up to their death, they had borrowed a submachine gun from Mad Mick Bowman. We also know that on the Truth documentary, there was a lady called Adele. I can't remember her surname. Adele O'Connor, something like that. Not the singer. And in that documentary, she claimed that one evening she had to take two big holdalls which had guns in them to a party where Pat and Tony were, I believe, from memory. So it's not just this one occasion that we're looking at where guns have been borrowed or guns have been involved. We also know that Tate had a handgun which was later recovered from his property. We also know, and many people probably don't know this, but there is a document which exists where Tony Tucker was actually trying to obtain a firearms license. So is that how all the pieces fit together in terms of the lure to get Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to the bottom of Workhouse Lane? We have the gun club which only opens on a Wednesday. Tucker, Tate and Rolfe arrive unarmed. There seems to be this desire or this need for weaponry in the weeks leading up to their deaths. Tucker, shortly before his own death, is applying for a firearms license. We have other people connected in that social circle talking about holdalls with guns in them. So is it beyond the realms of possibility again that these individuals were at a gun club or near a gun club on a Wednesday, which was the day that they did their shooting? And also, I think it's also worth remembering that we have those phone calls, don't we, from Mick Bowman, Mad Mick Bowman, the person who actually lent them the submachine gun. There's calls back and forth between Bowman and Tucker and Tate on the day of their murders. And finally, also worthy of mention is the fact that the phone call from the Sorrel Horse Inn on the afternoon of December the 6th goes to Tony Tucker, the same individual who shortly before his death is applying for a firearms licence. What we're going to do now is move back to the summing up in court document. The next morning, the 7th of December, at 7:45 a.m, Ken Jiggins went and met Peter Theobald. Peter Theobald drove him in the Land Rover down the farm track. There was a lot of snow and ice over the puddles as they drove, and none of the ice had been broken. It was around 8 o'clock that they came across the blue Range Rover parked facing towards the gate. They stopped 20 yards short of it. Mr. Jiggins went to the driver's side to ask whoever was inside to move so they could get through into the field. He tapped on the driver's window but did not look at the window. It was because he got no response that he did then look down through the window and saw what must have been the dreadful sight of the driver's head lying to one side of the window with blood coming from his nose and mouth. The front passenger's head was slumped forward and there was lots of blood to his head and chest. It was only the two bodies in the front that Mr. Jiggins noticed, and he called to Peter Theobald telling him what he had seen, mentioning only two people. Peter Theobald came down to the Range Rover, and as Mr. Jiggins was making a 999 call, Peter Theobald said, quote, There's one in the back as well." End quote. They got in their Land Rover, turned around, went back to the A130 to await the police, who had been called on the telephone. The police came after about 5 minutes and left their vehicle at the start of the track. All four, the 2 police officers and the 2 farmers, walked back to the top of the lane, but the 2 civilians did not go as far as the police officers and waited further down the track. Cross-examined by Mr. Parkins, Mr. Jiggins said that the A130 was a very busy road mornings and evenings. 7 till 9 in the morning, 4:45 until 6:30ish in the evening. He also said that courting couples used the track as a lover's lane. There was a padlock on the gate for 6 to 9 months, replacing one that was lost, and there was a fishing syndicate of about 10 to 15 people who would have had several keys. There was a way to the gate from the other side, but you had to go across fields. He looked at the photographs and said the tyre marks looked fresh. Those are the ones on the other side of the fence, but the ruts were deeper and that is why they looked undisturbed. The first dark stretch was a deeper track. He looked at Exhibit 3, the map, and said Rettendon Hall was on higher ground and had a view down into Workhouse Lane. The lane was fairly low down, and then the land rose up to Meadow Road. He did not see signs of well-defined shoe prints. He did not walk around the Range Rover. His own Wellingtons were 9 in size. They were taken from him by the police. He did not look for cartridge cases. Cross-examined by Mr. Lederman, he said there was some snow on the morning of the 7th of December, and in certain parts there was fluffy snow and ice. In other parts that were sheltered, there was very little snow. Mr. Theobald gave you similar evidence about the gate always being locked. He told you about going down on the morning of the 7th of December with Mr. Jiggins and getting to the Range Rover parked in front of the gate, and about Mr. Jiggins going to the driver's window, tapping on it, getting no response, calling to him, and he spoke of seeing the third body himself. He talked of the mobile phone being used and them driving back to the A130 and then going off to feed the birds but not using that track. In cross-examination, he said all the shooting syndicate had keys, so there were 10 or a dozen keys to the gate. Okay, so a couple of things worthy of note mentioned in those few paragraphs there. Firstly, it talks about the ice being unbroken when the farmers drive down the farm track at around 8 AM. It talks about the puddles being unbroken and also fresh snow or a fresh covering of snow with no kind of visible tyre tracks anywhere to be seen. Now, there has been discussion in the past regarding the police finding the bodies or knowing that these individuals were killed at around, I think it's like 6 or 6:30 AM. So does the presence of the unbroken ice and a fresh covering of snow go to disprove that in some ways? Now, it all depends obviously on the size of the puddle, the temperatures, and how long that would have actually have taken to have frozen over. So make of that really what you will. And then we have the discussion regarding the locked 5-bar gate. Now, this is a topic that many people discuss, and it's a commonly asked question in the comment section to my videos. How many people had access to this gate? How many people had keys? Could it have been that someone in the shooting syndicate was in on this murder or had some prior knowledge of it taking place? Well, it appears here that there are around 10 to 12 keys. So 10 to 12 individuals who had keys to that locked 5-bar gate. Let's continue on from where we left off. They had retreated from the Range Rover so as not to interfere with any marks. His own Wellington boots were taken. Their vehicle had not been down the track after 7 o'clock the previous evening. The next morning they had to defrost their own vehicle. There was no frost or snow anywhere on the roof or the windscreen of the Range Rover. No steaming up of the interior. He would have expected it to be frosted up if it was there for many hours. In cross-examination by Mr. Lederman, he said there was enough frost to need to defrost his own vehicle. His own vehicle had been parked since 5 PM the previous night at the farmyard, which was fairly open to the weather. Okay, so a brief point worthy of mention during this paragraph, and that is the lack of frost and snow found on the Range Rover. Now, I've done extensive videos regarding this point in the past, but I think what's important when looking at those recent paragraphs is the description of the farmer's vehicle. Now, if we just relay some of the information from a previous video, one of the reasons why the Range Rover would have been found frost-free, didn't have any frost on the vehicle, it was almost as if it had just arrived basically, but the reason that it could appear that way is because of where that vehicle was parked. As you can see in the photographs in front of you here, the Range Rover had vegetation to its left and right, and also some overhanging trees. Basically what happens is that the vehicle and that vegetation exchange escaping radiation, thus stopping the forming of frost on the vehicle. The giveaway sign in all of this is where the farmer talks about his own vehicle being parked out in the open. If you have open conditions, you have clear line of sight to outer space, it's easier for that frost to form on the farmer's vehicle. Whereas the Range Rover, it had been used all throughout the day. The vehicle would have also retained a certain amount of heat even after these murders had taken place, plus the fact that we have this vegetation to the left and right of the vehicle, plus the overhanging trees. Okay, let's leave this episode here for today. If you haven't seen the first part in this new series, do feel free to check that out on the channel. It's called A Fresh Look at the Evidence. It'll be the video that I uploaded before this one. So if you haven't seen that, do feel free to check it out. And as always, many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.